Hey there, aspiring guitarists. We're going to do it. We're going to look at the Gibson L-00 versus the Epiphone L-00. I've mentioned it in several prior videos. I had a short about it. We're going to get down, and let me just go right ahead and talk about some of the things I've already said. Is either one, the Gibson or the Epiphone, worth buying? Absolutely. Um, the high end Gibson is absolutely worth the extra money and the appointments, and we're going to talk about why. And the Epiphone at the lower price with very good appointments, not as good as the Gibson, but absolutely a great guitar. So, um, yeah, we're going to look at those differences. But first of all, let's talk about the L-00. All right, this is one of the many Gibson guitar books. And as you can see here, it goes through and it shows all the various different history of Gibson guitars and the players. And down here in this photograph, which we're talking about the Depression area and right prior to World War II, you can see the guitar. Both the gentlemen down here have on cowboy hats, but the guitar with the white pickguard is an L-00, and it's his partner is playing a big jumbo. So, this is in the Gibson 100 Years of American Idol, and then there's another very popular Gibson book, an illustrated history and guide, and you can see right here, this goes into the history of the L-00 and how it was put out as a catalog, and it was marketed as an affordable guitar for the family, and it became iconic in history because it was well built, and you could actually get it into your family to kind of relieve some of the depression of the Depression. So I'm going to move this real quick. I'll bring it back. Okay, and let me get to the side here. There's the two guitars. The Epiphone is on my left. The Gibson is on my right. I've tried to make the two Hercules stands the same size because you can see they're practically the same size, but not quite. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about, here's the Epiphone. Now understand, when I compared these two, there's different type of Epiphone L-00s. This one is the studio version, and that's not uncommon. So, but it's more of a hugging parlor type 00 guitar. It is an acoustic electric. But what we're going to talk about, some of the major differences are going to be the width of the bouts. This is the upper bout. This is the lower bout. And then you've got the waist. So you're going to see the difference. Now I'm going to show you the depth of these two guitars is practically the same, with the exception of the Epiphone tends to change as it goes up and down the neck. But that's gonna, when you've got a guitar that's so very similar and little things like the body shape, the bout shape, although you're gonna see in my comparison, some of these are half-inch differences. But that can really matter when you're holding a guitar, playing a guitar. Other thing we're going to look at is the electronics. You can see this Epiphone, the electronics on both guitars are in the sound hole, which means you reach in and you turn the little knobs here to get to them, so it's out of the way and it's compact. Generally, you have a volume and a tone knob as both of these do, but they're different electronics. We're going to talk about that. So let me get, that was the Epiphone. This is the Gibson. You can hear it. So besides the bouts and the waist and the size, we're going to actually talk about the material used for the saddle, material used for the nut. We're going to talk about the dots that are on the fretboard because they are different, very different. We're going to talk a little bit about the binding, what goes around the guitar, very close. The bracing is very similar, except the Gibson has a hand scallop bracing we'll talk a little bit about. They're very similar in look. It's, you know, this one looks almost like the Epiphone, although the Epiphone is a little more of an orange tint, I would call it. That's my view. The tuners. Both tuners are Grover mini tuners, so, you know, that's a big thing in itself. You've got little things like the truss rod cover. You know, Gibson is using the typical bell, where Epiphone is using theirs that some people call a fish. It's, you know, we'll show you the difference in that. The electronics are very different. The Gibson has an LR bags. The Epiphone has a Fishman. Now, Fishman makes great acoustic electronics, but LR bags is known as a higher quality. So that's what set these guitar apart. I mean, personally, and remember, what I'm telling you, I'm going to show you things that are different, but playability is always subjective. I love the Epiphone. Would I feel okay with having that Epson L-00 instead of the $3,000+ Gibson? Yes, I would. Is there anything wrong with wanting the Gibson? Of course not. It's a quality crafted instrument. To me, the Gibson plays a little better. To me, the size of the Gibson fits my stature. But the Epiphone might fit someone else's better. This is all subjective, but I do think it helps to see things. I'm also, I can't influence you on how you feel about Epiphone, Gibson, Fender, Squier. I gotta have this, I gotta have that. I'm a big person about playing the guitar. If you can get to a music store, a guitar center, a local mom and pop, and play the guitars will speak to you when you play. But if you're planning to buy one online, then hopefully this will help. But I think you can see they both sound great. All right, hold that E minor in your head. Now I'm going back to the Epiphone. And of course, the pick guard on the Epiphone has metallic E, the Epiphone E. So let's get into the differences. All right, let me pull this back around and get it up here where we can deal with it. Okay, and this is just, I printed out the Epiphone stats, and then I wrote the difference with the Gibson stats. And I could have done something wrong. I certainly hope not, but I certainly could have. So basically, you have the item, Gibson, Epiphone. First listing will be Gibson, second Epiphone. Now, there are some things that I didn't include. Like the body shape of both is a parlor style. It's a 00. Now I realize that can be debated. Acoustic guitar size and body shapes are not uniform across manufacturers. Although you got to remember, Gibson and Epiphone are sister companies. So, you're going to have a lot more uniformity, with there. But even with that uniformity, you'll see there are some differences. So things that were the same, back and side woods, mahogany. Now the top wood, the only thing I noticed different, they're both spruce tops, which spruce gives you that bright, ringing sound. But Gibson did note that theirs was Sitka spruce. I didn't see that on anything with Epiphone. I could be wrong. So anyway, so my point is, I'm not going to, little minute things like Epiphone says they have X bracing. The Gibson says has hand scalloped X bracing. So, you may find some tiny little differences. They both have slim taper necks, things like that. But let's talk about the differences. Remember, here's the item. Gibson's first, Epiphone is second. The finish. Gibson has the expensive nitrocellulose. Epiphone has polyurethane. They both feel good. Nitrocellulose has that wonderful feel and look. Looks a little more polished, but it also requires that, if you put it on a stand that isn't safe for that type of finish, it'll mar it. You'll see the scratch. I don't know if scratch would be a good word, the wound to that area. So what I do, even though a lot of these makers of guitar racks and things and hangers and wall hangers will say they're nitrocellulose safe, I still take a polishing cloth and put over the hanger part just to be safe. Okay, the fingerboard. The Gibson is rosewood. The Epiphone is Indian laurel. Both are great. Rosewood, debatably by many, is often known as the king of fingerboard material, but that's, of course, debatable. The nut width. Well, there's a little bit of a difference. 1.725, 1.68. 725 on the Gibson, 6.8 on the Epiphone. So the Gibson has a little bit bigger of a nut width, and I did notice it. But then I pay attention to nut widths. I'm a nerd like that, but that's part of how I know and dismiss if I'm going to buy a guitar that's on sale online. There's some, like, I know that a nylon, a true nylon guitar typically has a 2-inch nut width. So you're talking about a fretboard that's wider than a 168 or things like that. So there's a little difference there. The nut and the saddle. Okay, that's a pretty big difference. Gibson is using TUSQ, T-U-S-Q. Look it up, and you'll see that it's a higher grade component for nuts and saddle, where Epiphone's using plastic. Now, that gets into a whole nother debate of guitar parts. Many people think that a bone or a tusk, a new bone, all the different variations of that makes a huge difference on the tone. Some people say it doesn't, but there you go. Okay, the inlay. Now, we're talking about the dots, because both guitars have dots on the fretboard. 3rd, 5, 7, 9, blah, blah. Well, the Gibson, once again, higher end, uses mother of pearl, whereas the Epiphone just says white dots. You can visibly look at it. The white dots look fine, but they do not shine and gleam like the mother of pearl. The electronics. The Gibson uses the LR bags. The Epiphone, the Fishman Sonocore. The Fishman Sonocore is a fine electronic for an acoustic guitar. It really is. I've got it in several guitars. The LR bags really excels though. When I turn the volume knob, and I'm sorry, I'm not gonna hook up it electrically to let you hear. Now you can find that on other places on YouTube. And the reason for that is because amps change. To me, acoustically, you're going to get a pure sound. And I played it acoustically, both of them. To me, amps, even though they go, well, I'm dialed in at reverb at 12 o'clock and this at this and this at that. All you got to do is have a different amp. You could be dealing with 60 cycle hum, all kind of things. To me, the best representation of an acoustic guitar is playing it acoustically. But I did notice that with the tone on the Gibson with the LR bags, I got more of, as I turned it slightly, I got different tones that were more pronounced. That was just my view. Okay, now we're going to talk about the bouts. And the upper bout, the bouts are the circles of the guitar. I'm going to grab, this is not either one, but just a reminder, upper bout, waist, lower bout. So the lower bout's always bigger, the waist is the smallest of the dimensions, upper bout smaller than the lower bout, but larger than the waist. Now, there is a difference. I noticed it. But then I noticed it with my shoulder, but it wasn't bad. There was nothing bad. But this may surprise you. So, the upper bout of the Gibson is 10 inches. The upper bout of the Epiphone is 10 3/4. The waist, the smallest part, on the Gibson's 8.5, on the Epiphone 9 1/4. The lower bout, the largest measurement, 14.5 on the Gibson, 15.5 on the Epiphone. So what does that show us? The Epiphone is actually a bigger guitar body-wise. Now that matters to me. It's not going to matter to a lot of people because I have shoulder problems. So I like the Epiphone L-00. It is appealing to me to play. The Gibson I like even better. So, but that's once again subjective. But there are differences clearly showing the Epiphone has larger measurements. Now, the depth of the guitar. All right, the depth of the guitar is how wide it is, and a lot of people look at the depth. That's where you'll hear somebody call something a slimline guitar, which, an electric's depth is very small, where acoustics start getting between 3 and 4 inches, and an electric might simply be around 2. The depth was the same, and it varied. The upper bout depth was 3 1/4 on both, and the lower bout it graduated to 4 inches. So we're talking about, going from this to going out a little bit. They were the same, except there was some variance on the Epiphone as I traveled from the upper bout down to the lower bout. Was it noticeable to me? Not really, but it absolutely could be to somebody playing. And that's where you get into, once again, how important it is if you can play a guitar before you buy it, how important that is. Now, with that said, you got to think about the liberal return policies that many of the online guitar makers have. And I think that's wonderful. I think they should have those policies. All I can tell you, it's a pain in the butt to ship something back. That's my subjective view. It's nice to know you can. I think they absolutely should offer that. Even if it's for a limited time, 30 days, something like that. I'm not saying you're going to have to always check with whoever you're buying from online to see what the return policy is. Some places, in fact, there's some manufacturers, you can buy direct from the manufacturer and they will not have a return policy. They'll have a return policy if there's a defect. But they're not even going to have a return policy if you just don't like the guitar. So that's a whole nother video one day as manufacturers start entering online sales, and several of them do now. So, and you can hear, like, one of our award winners for a guitar podcast is Casino Guitars, Casino Guitars, and they talk about that, how they're a custom shop dealer themselves, and many of the manufacturers compete with them, and they're okay with that. They realize that, you know, it's something the manufacturers are going to do, but yeah, and there's you got some manufacturers opening up shops in major cities that don't sell, but they allow you to play something. So the guitar market is ever changing. That's why, you know, it's exciting times. You just got to do a little research and thought. And I still always say there's nothing better than playing a guitar. It speaks to you. I've picked up guitars in a guitar store that more than one of the same model, and one will speak to me and the other doesn't. Guitars are different. The wood's different. The craftsmanship is different. They even though many of them are mass produced, some of them are handcrafted in places, and even the ones that are mass produced, wood bindings, this, that, the other, position of the nut, the width, the saddle, all that can make a difference. So anyway, moving on. We talked about the death. Let's get to the last thing. This shows another reason you've got this price difference between around $3,000 for the Gibson, around $400 to $500 to $600 for the Epiphone, depending on which model of the L-00 you get. Studio, this, that, colors. Some of these online will offer specials on one type of color. It might be sunburst, it might be black. Sometimes they'll offer a special with more than one color, although I don't see normally the really special online offers, really special, they've chosen one color or finish, and that's what they're running with. The case. Well, the Gibson comes with a beautiful branded hard shell case. The Epiphone that I've seen in numerous offerings doesn't come with a case. It just doesn't. That doesn't mean you can't get one that'll fit it. There's Gator cases, Silver Creek. There's all kind of cases, you know, that in fact Sweetwater has gone to, when they list something, they'll show certified fit cases. I think Phil McKnight, Know Your Gear podcast, talked about that Sweetwater had actually bought out a case company. That might be something worth looking into. So here are some of your differences. So those are things, you heard both the guitars play. There's slight differences, but they're significant in regard to the cost. Some of the things that I consider very significant are the nut and saddle, because that's going to last longer than that. Fingerboards, playability. If you're going to plug in and you need, if you're going to use one of these guitars to gig, to perform, to play at a restaurant, for whatever reason you're doing, that might become a consideration. Although the Fishman sounds great, I love Fishman electronics. I think they're great. I love my Fishman Loudbox Mini amp. In my opinion, it is one of the best acoustic guitar amps made. Fishman does a great job. So you're going to see some of these differences here. You know, some people don't care about in fact, as much as the Nitro looks good and feels good, some people don't want it because they don't, the finish has to be well protected and they don't want to go through all that. So, you know, you have to think about these things, but I think they are both fine guitars. I'm not going to go into depth about which one, you know, play what makes you happy. Play what you can afford. I would, maybe one person in my 52 years of guitar playing, did I see a band perform and somebody make a derogatory mark about that they were playing an Epiphone over a Gibson or a Scratch. Now, yeah, those people exist. I've heard Epiphones that sound great. I've heard Gibsons that sound great. Um, that, there's a market for both people that like both things. Um, don't be ashamed of your guitar choices, unless you need to be. So, I mean, I am always going to tell you it's your guitar journey. Y'all seen some of the guitars I have. I put stickers and decals and circle of fists, and but that's my personality. I don't give a darn if somebody likes it or not. If I'm playing, I got nothing against people that feel like their band needs a branded look. Different strokes for different folks. The L-00, it's a great guitar. It's a great acoustic electric guitar. I think you'll do fine with either one. I hope you enjoyed this. We're going to do some more. I'm going to look at some Fenders and Squires. I'm going to try to, for beginner guitars, noodling guitars, smart guitars, things that I think may enhance your guitar journey. I'll try to do a little more reviews of that. And I've kind of laid out the structure of how I'm going to do a review. I'm not going to try to do like some of these very high end on YouTube that have done a great job with tones and showing different things like that. I'm going to show you the basics of the guitar, let you hear it acoustically. I probably won't do a lot of electrics. If I do, it's like I always say, I've got a Positive Grid Spark 40 amp that I'm pretty much going to play on the clean setting. And I'll tell you what everything's set at. And so if I do review an electric, I'm just not going to get into all that. I think most people, it's already being done on YouTube, and I'm not here to reinvent the wheel. So I'll be talking about a special guitar, something that's unique, something that might enhance your journey. We'll have a new chord progression coming up this week ahead, along with a few other things. I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope your guitar journey is blessed, and as always, happy picking.